How do you feel about yourself? Are you self-confident? Are you motivated? Do you procrastinate? Do you really feel that it's possible for you to succeed? You stay with us, because during the next few minutes, right here on this program, we're going to show you how you can program yourself for success on this edition of Everybody's Money Matters.
Do you dream of being independently wealthy, enjoying the good life, traveling to exotic places, living in a luxurious home? If these are things you'd like to do, you need to be a part of Everybody's Money Matters. Live from Hollywood, welcome to Everybody's Money Matters, your program for edutainment. Starring America's foremost expert in real estate, Tony Hoffman, and yours truly, Bob Braun. On tonight's show, program yourself for success by using subliminal programming with Joe Land, a show you don't want to miss. And now your host and the author of How to Negotiate Successfully in Real Estate, America's foremost negotiator, here's Tony Hoffman.
Hi, Bob. Hi, everybody. I am so excited about tonight's show. We've got Joe Land with us, and I'll tell you, the subliminal tapes, I don't want to steal all the thunder, but some people have seen Joe on the show before. But it's so exciting what Joe is going to be telling you about how our mind can really tell us what we should be doing if we'll only give the right messages to our mind. I mean, look what it's done for me and my weight loss. We'll talk more about that later.
Absolutely, and I want to tell you how important we feel this show is. We are not going to interrupt the body of this program with any commercial. We would like, however, to suggest to you that you have paper and pen or pencil ready, because at the conclusion of Joe Land's talk, we're going to give you a special phone number and a special address so that you can program yourself for success. It's exciting, and when you think about the concept, I saw it work on you.
Oh, it certainly did.
And tonight he's going to talk about that. Tony, how did he happen to get involved in this?
Well, Joe was a national real estate lecturer. And he was with, because I've seen him out there with me on the National Superstar Tour, and he was so enthusiastic, and people were buying his home study courses. And then he got very discouraged about it because people weren't following through. They just weren't applying what we knew worked. They weren't going out and applying it. They were just dying on the vine. And so he said, there's something else, there's something missing, and that's what led him to subliminal tapes.
So he got involved in this success program for motivating people and making people have more self-confidence. As a matter of fact...
Well, first he did it for himself.
I know.
Then he started telling other people.
So when he's talking from personal experience.
We're talking about positive thinking. We're talking about attitude. We're talking about anything you want out of life through the use of the subliminal mind.
Well, Tony, one of the things you'll talk about is communicating. It's what you do, it's what I do. You could not always do that, neither could I. But Joe Land can show you how you can. Without further ado, Tony?
Here's Joe Land in seminar.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all doing all right tonight? I'm going to tell you something. I got a wild tale for you. You want to get ready. I don't know whether you're going to need a pen and pencil or not, but just get ready, because I've got something to tell you that I'm more excited about than anything I've ever done. Let me tell you what happens to people who try to become financially successful. People go to real estate seminars, and they spend 2 days. They go home. They don't need a car to ride home, and those folks are convinced that for the first time, the reality of them living in the posh end of town, having the things they'd really like to have, having the last frontier freedom, the financial freedom, the freedom to have the money to do whatever it is you want to do, can be theirs. And so they call that first for sale by owner the next morning and make an appointment to look at that first property. And I'll tell you, those of you who've been to those courses can relate to what I'm talking about. You make that appointment, and then after work, when it comes time to go over and see that property, they get in their car, and on the way over there, the biggest enemy that ever faces them in their real estate investing career rears its ugly head and stops 90% of them dead in their tracks. You know what it is? Let me tell you what it's not. It's not anything big enough that it ought to stop them. I mean, the highway patrol does not pull them over and say, okay, get your hands on the hood. We think you're trying to buy real estate. That doesn't happen. It's a little bitty, teeny, tiny voice. It says, you ain't no real estate investor. Who you trying to kid? You're the same guy you were last Friday, except that you're $400 poorer because you gave that $400 to that real estate outfit. And you know, the problem is not that everybody hears the voice, because everybody really does. The problem is Most of them respond to it. 90% of them respond to it by saying, and I thought I was a real estate investor. See, here's the problem. In order to become a real estate investor, you got to go act like a real estate investor. You got to do the things that a real estate investor does. But people somehow can't rake up the courage to act like a real estate investor if they're not one. And so they can't become one until they act like one. They can't act like one until they become one. It's catch-22. And there isn't any way they're going to get out of it. You see, they got to understand, people have to understand the problem is here. Why do some people win and some people lose? Why do some people make good decisions? Why do some people make bad decisions? Why are people able to overcome their problems sometimes and other people not? Everybody here knows at least of a millionaire that went broke and became a millionaire, went broke and became a millionaire 4, 5, 6 times in their life. Took him 25 years the first time, took him 2 years the second time. But how come they can do it several times? It's because you can take, if you take a millionaire, you take somebody who's been successful financially, you can rob him and take everything that he's got away from him except his most precious commodity, and that is his millionaire mind. He believes himself worthy to be a millionaire. He thinks himself capable. And you know, most people don't really think they're worthy. And when you visualize that there's 2% that are haves, that have the things they want, just 2 little bitty teeny tiny percent, and another 98% of the have-nots, come on now. Which group do you really feel like you belong in? And are you really going to strive to get into a group that you don't even feel like you're worthy to be in? I was doing a seminar in Salt Lake City, and there was a psychiatrist there, one of the neatest fellows I'd ever met. We were talking during the break. This is probably one of the neatest days in my life when I look back on it, because in that very same seminar in Salt Lake City, a lady came up to me, and she said, Joe, she said, have you ever heard of subliminal mind programming? And I said, well, no, ma'am, I can't say I ever have. And she said, well, she said, I represent a company that makes a cassette tape. And she said, this cassette tape, when you play it on a machine like any other cassette, and she said, all you hear are ocean waves. You hear waves, and an occasional seagull fly by, and a cricket every now and then, and that's about all you hear. She said, at least that's all your conscious mind hears. But she said, your subconscious mind hears some voices that are embedded down in those waves. And she said the subconscious not only hears those voices, but it understands them and gets reprogrammed as a result of it. I said, sure. Yeah, I'm real positive that happened. And she said, well, here's some literature. You know, it's got my phone number. Read this, and if you're interested, give me a call. And so, you know, I've been to a lot of seminars, and I've had a lot of people give me a lot of things. And I can tell you that I would have thrown that piece of paper away had it not been for about the time she turned and left. I looked over and saw my psychiatrist friend. Now, it's kind of nice to have a professional there that you can check out these things, so I went over there to find out what the deal was. I went up and I said, have you ever heard of subliminal mind programming? And he said, sure. And I said, well, is it valid? He said, oh, yeah, it's scientific, it's fact. And I said, really, tell me about it. Well, I had an artist draw the picture that he described to me because I found that people can understand it a whole lot better. If we can put that thing up, let me show you how that psychiatrist told me he explains the human mind to his patients. There it is. Can you see that? He said, I want you to picture your subconscious mind as a great big room. That's your resource room. That's your storage room. That's your data room. That's where everything you've ever heard, seen, heard, or tasted, felt, smelt, said, did is in that room. It's a huge recording device. Now, he said, I want you to picture your conscious mind as the guard standing at the door of that room. He said, now, the guard is in charge, and he makes all the decisions. He decides what to do. He's the one that puts the personality forth. He does all the talking. But he said, that guard operates because of and in relation to and as a result of the data in that room. Now, think about this for a minute. Imagine your mind that way. The conscious mind, the part of you that you're aware of. And let me talk just a minute about the conscious mind as opposed to the subconscious in the terms we understand it. Subconscious means unconscious or not aware. You are not aware of what's happening in 88% of your mind. The only part of your mind that you are aware of is the 12% that's the conscious mind. That part that you are aware of, that's where you live. And it can only deal with one issue at a time. your conscious mind is really pretty feeble compared to the rest of your mind. But they tell us that the subconscious mind can perceive, store, and retain up to 100 million bits of information a second. Now, folks, that's moving pretty fast in deciphering and storing a whole lot of things, stimulus coming in from your five senses. See, your conscious mind can only do one thing at a time, and it's control. See, you think you're in control, but you're not. Your conscious mind is being controlled by your subconscious mind, because the things that are in your room, the things that are in your subconscious mind, your programming, if you will, dictate how you act. When you were born, that whole process, the room and the guard, was just squeaky clean. Nothing in there. And your parents were the first thing, were the first ones in charge of putting something in there. And guess what your parents' favorite word for you was in the first 10 years or so of your life? What would you think? No. No. Is no a negative word? Folks, no is the epitome of a negative word. For some reason, parents feel obligated to spend the first 10 or 12 years of their children's lives telling them no and telling them what they can't do. You can't do this, and you can't do that, and you better not do this, and if you do that again, you're going to be in trouble, and if you keep on doing that, you're either going to end up in jail or dead. You remember all that? They told us over and over and over what we can't do. In fact, they tell us that surveys and studies reveal that the average parent, for every one positive thing they say to their children, they say 25 negative things. Now, folks, I want you, excuse me, just to imagine that we got all these negative things coming in the door here. 25 to 1, negative, no, things you can't do. And all of that stuff goes in there and starts to pile up. And remember, that's your resource room. That's your data room. You're getting programmed with all that stuff. And frankly, all that garbage that we get in our room begins to stink. And the stench comes back out that door, and guess what it does? It begins to affect your guard. Because remember, that's your resource room. That's where he gets his attitude from. It's where he gets his feelings from. It's where he gets his opinions from. And then he gets into the process. Then you begin to help the process, because reacting now negatively because of the negative programming and the negative feedback you get from that part of your brain that really controls you, you start to say negative things. And we say things like, oh gosh, I never have been able to do that. Oh, I've never had the patience to do that. Well, just haven't never had the talent to do that. And then, for God's sake, some of us start talking about being unlucky. Well, with my luck, this thing will fall down just the minute I walk in there, you know. And see, you heard a computer programmer say garbage in, garbage out. You ever heard that? Works exactly the same way with a human mind. And it also works backwards from that, too. Garbage out, garbage back in, because the stink from all the negative garbage piled up in our room comes and affects the guard. Then he begins to talk and act and think negatively, and that stuff goes right back in the room, and it all piles up, and it's a wonder we do anything positively. See, when people come to financial courses, when people come to seminars to learn how to make a bunch of money, they come in an attempt to learn how to change their behavior. But folks standing up in front of a crowd and telling them what they have to do is a long way from enabling them to go do it. I mean, if you're going to start doing something you've never done before and stop doing a bunch of things you've always done before, it's going to take more than some instructor standing up there telling you what it is he did. Of course, what he did was successful, but can you go do it? Can you find the courage, the creativity, the enthusiasm? Can you find the self-image to go out and do those things? Most people can't, and that's why most people fail. Folks, it's here. Here's the key. Stop looking outside. You can't change your behavior until you change your attitude. But you see, you can't change your attitude until you change your feelings. You can't change your feelings until you change your beliefs. And you can't change your beliefs until you change the things that are in your subconscious mind. Folks, listen to me. This is where it is. Abundance comes from an abundant state of mind. And you're not ever going to be wealthy out here until you're wealthy in here. This psychiatrist said, Joe, he said, we could solve the problem of all the negative programming in the room. And I'm going to tell you something. You don't even know who you are. You don't have any idea who you'd be if the things that happened to you hadn't happened to you. Because you still react to those things because they're programming. They're in that room. You don't know about them because that's a subconscious, unconscious room, but they control you. He said, Joe, you got a low self-image. And I said, how do you know I got a low self-image? You just met me. He said, because everybody has a low self-image. You know, when you think about what a magnificent creature you are, I'll promise you, you have a low self-image of yourself in comparison to what you really are. And let me tell you how I know. I've had enough of the darkness of my view of myself lift off me that I can see enough light that I can tell you, folks, it's a glorious life if you can just feel good about yourself. And most of us have felt bad about ourselves so long, and it's been such a gradual process that we're not even aware of our low self-image. And he said, Joe, you got a low self-image. You don't think as much of yourself as you should. He said, I could set you down, Joe. He said, now, we'll never get rid of the negative things that are in your room. They're there forever. It's a storage device, and they'll always be there. But he said, we can cover it up with positive things. We can pile more positive things in there than you have negative, and you'll start to feel good about yourself. And then the breeze that comes out the front door that affects your guard and how he acts starts to smell good, and it starts to feel good, and he starts to feel good about himself, and he starts to feel capable and able. He said there's a couple of problems, though. He says the only way we can get anything into the room is by giving it to the guard. Here's what we do. He said, we just sit down. And over and over and over again, I tell you, Joe, you're good. Joe, you're as good as anybody else. Joe, if someone else did it, you can do it. You're unique. You're a human being. God made you, and God didn't make any junk. And he said, we can say all of that stuff we want to, but he said, I've got to say it literally millions and millions of times because you've got years and years and years worth and millions of negative suggestions in your mind that have taken their toll. And he said, you put a bunch of them in there. God, every time you think and talk negatively instead of positively. He said, well, we could do that. He said, one of us is going to get tired after 6 or 8 months of me telling you how good you are over and over and over the same sentences, so we pile up those affirmations. But he said, that's not our biggest problem. He said, our biggest problem is that we got to give that message to the guard at the door so that he can take it in the room. And here we go. We say to the guard, Joe, you're good. You're as good as anybody, Joe. You can do it. And we say, okay, guard, take the message in the room. And so he takes the message. But you see, the guard's attitude is affected by the programming that's already in the room, and he's on their side. Did you know that? I mean, his reference point is negative. He feels bad about himself, and so he takes the message, Joe, you're good, and he takes it into the room, and he says, we're trying to make you believe this, but it ain't true, and he puts it down. Now, how much good's that going to do? Remember the movie 2001? Remember the computer? For those of you who didn't see that movie, there was a computer out in outer space, and he was in charge of everything, the life support systems, and they named him Hal. This computer had a personality. He bought foreclosures in his spare time. No, I'm just teasing. That's not right. But this computer had some bad programming, and old Hal began to shut things off and kill people, and they couldn't get him to stop. And they needed to reprogram Hal. They needed to take out that bad programming, and they needed to put in some good programming. But they couldn't, because Hal wouldn't let them, because Hal suffered from his bad programming. And part of the programming process was to teach him that that's who he was and that's who he should be and that was normal for him. And he resists change. He wouldn't let you change him because we don't like people changing our program. And so we tend to be what we think we are when, in fact, we are just reacting to garbage that's in our room. And so they were faced with a problem of trying to find a way to get into Hal's data banks and change his programming without him knowing it. And folks, that's exactly what has to happen in your subconscious mind. Your guard is going to taint, is going to stop, is going to almost void any attempt to put new programming